Okay, this week's Parsha begins with the words, when you go forth to war against your enemies, and the Lord your God has delivered them into your hands, and you have taken them captive. Now, I want to point out a couple of things as we jump into this, and this isn't going to be the theme of my message or the main point, but there's a promise in here of God delivering and taking the enemy captive. He doesn't just say when you go to war, but he says after you've gone to war and God has delivered them and you have taken them captive. Then it gets into all these descriptions of what to do with the women you capture and so on. I don't want to get bogged down in that. We did talk some of that in our Torah studies. But this is, in this week's Parsha, 74 of the 613 commandments exist. There are more commandments in this Parsha than any of the other Parshas that we do. And all of these commandments deal with civil society once they get into the land and how you're going to worship God and love your neighbor once you get in the land. So it's a lot of information about things that we would call social justice today. And I want you to know, if you're looking for social justice outside of the Torah, you're not going to find it. And I also want you to read into this the reality that these commandments that are being given concerning how to treat captives and how to treat people in war and what to do were unique to Israel in a time when nobody else cared about the people that were killed or left widowed in war. This is God bringing forth a way to take care of people who have been either, because you would go into a city and you would kill all of the men. And then you would just leave and the women would be there and just have no one to take care of them and die. And God's saying, no, don't do that. If you go in and you take over a city, then you have a responsibility to the people that are in that city and how to handle that and how to allow them to mourn their loss. That was unique, to give your adversary an opportunity to mourn the loss of their family. There's a lot of really interesting things in here that really show God's love for people, both His people and those that would become His people from outside of His people. So as this is going on, if we get to verse chapter 22, I want to point out, I think it's chapter 22. Verse 22, I'm sorry. Same chapter, verse 22. I want to point out, it says, if a man committed a sin deserving death and he's to be put to death, you hang him on a tree. His body shall not remain all night on the tree, but you shall bury him that day. For he who is hanged is accursed by God, that your land which the Lord your God gives you for an inheritance is not defiled. Now, I want to point out some things here because this verse is the reason that Yeshua is taken off of the cross before the sun goes down. And there are people that read this and say, for he who was hanged is accursed by God, and try to apply that and say Yeshua was accursed by God. But the context of this, especially in the Hebrew, is if they remain up there all night, they're accursed by God. Not just that they got hung, because innocent people were hung, but if they were not taken down, the sign of that was that this was an evil person that deserves to be accursed by God. And so Yeshua is taken down. He is never accursed by God. He is taken down before the sun and is buried. So it's important to note that. Okay. Then I want to point out, and this is the gist of the first half of my message. There's so much in here. You could spend hours and hours just picking through all of these commandments and how they relate to us as believers. And I want to say our Matthew reading about divorce and remarriage and all. I'm not getting into that today, but if you would like to learn more about what we believe as a community, what I believe as a rabbi concerning that, we did a 4-part video series that you can find on the website of that a few years ago. You just look it up. It's marriage, divorce, and remarriage, and that'll go into that and help you understand all that. So, but I don't want to dig into that today because I really want to focus on this next 2 things that I want to talk about, and then try to figure out how we apply these things to our lives today so that we can be a better believer, a better disciple, a better example for other people in result of this. So verse 1 of the next chapter says, "You shall not watch your brother's ox or his sheep go astray, and hide yourself from them. You shall in any case bring them again to your brother. And if your brother is not near you, or if you know him not, then you shall bring it to your own house, and it shall be with you until your brother seeks after it, and you shall restore back to him. In like manner shall you do with his donkey, so shall you do with his garment, and with every lost thing of your brother's, which he has lost, and you have not found, shall you do likewise. You may not hide yourself." Now, this may not seem like the most spiritual or supernatural or exciting series of verses in the Torah. Matter of fact, if you're reading this Parsha looking for something to jump up and down about, it's just a bunch of list of rules and laws and things to do with your life. But each of them are significant in what's going on. But what I want to point out in this is the word hide in the English is 2 places in this text. My watch got fixed, but now my keys got caught on my wallet and distracted me. I apologize. Okay, the first time it says in verse 1, you shall not watch your brother's ox or his sheep and go and hide yourself from them. That word there actually means just to hide yourself. You see something happening and you hide to avoid responsibility, to just let it happen, to pretend you didn't see it and just let what was going on happen, and so that nobody sees you doing that, so that you can claim plausible deniability. But in verse 3, the word is different. The end of that verse, it says, "You may not hide yourself." Now that word there in the context is you cannot hide yourself. Not just that you won't, but that you can't. And that's a difference. The first one is you can. If I see Robert's donkey, having problems, and I just hide behind some trees or in a bush or on the other side of the barn because I don't want to get involved, I don't have the time, I don't have the energy, I may not even like Robert. I might not even like donkeys. And I hide so as to avoid responsibility for something that belongs to my brother. I can do that. I can hide. But it says not to. But the second time it talks about hiding, it says you won't be able to. And what it's actually saying is, I may hide from you, but I can't hide from Hashem. That's what's being said here, is that you're not supposed to hide and avoid it, but you may think you're pulling the wool over somebody's eyes. You may think you got away with it. You may think nobody saw you, so it didn't happen. Moose. The big deer. If you go hunting moose and they see you, they will hide their face behind a tree. Now, the rest of their body may be in the open, but the fact that they can't see you makes them think you can't see them. And we have to understand that in our lives, the things we don't do for God, the things we don't do for our brother, the things we don't do for those around us, the stranger, the sojourner, the immigrant, the people that we can help, we may think that we're hiding by not being obedient to God and doing what is right for whatever reason we choose to do it. But the truth is, we're like that moose. We may not think we're seen, but we're seen. There's nothing that you do is hidden from God. Nothing that you're doing. If you're watching something in the dark at your house and thinking nobody is seeing you watch it, know that you can't hide. When Ananias and Sapphira brought their offering, and they said, "We sold the house and we're giving everything," and the Lord took their life, it's because although they thought they were hiding, they really weren't. And so these words that are in this Parsha here are teaching the children of Israel that as you're learning how to be a new nation, as you're going into the land and you've been given these laws and rules to abide by as a nation, as a country, you may think that because you didn't see somebody catching you or watching you, that you were okay and that nobody saw it. But I want you to know God sees it. And the recompense for your actions is coming even if it doesn't come from other people. When I was a kid, I was raised in a righteous leaning home. I went to synagogue every week. Went to Hebrew school. We were very active in our community. But I was not a good kid. And we had figured out that if you take an alligator clip and then tie a bunch of rubber bands together and then tie the alligator clip on the rubber band, you could hook one of the rubber bands over your finger and run it through the sleeves of your jacket and then take the alligator clip and hook it to a candy bar. And then let go of the alligator clip, and it would pick the candy bar up, sling it through your jacket sleeves, and down into your pocket. Now, I'm not sharing that to our young people to encourage them on how to get a Milky Way. But we never got caught because nobody saw what was happening. But I promise you, God saw. Just because I thought I was outsmarting everybody, that's not true. The things you do to your family that are hidden, the things you say to your husband or wife, the things you say to your children, the things you say about people when they're not present, the things you say about people in other communities and congregations, the people you say about souls that you diminish the value of in your congregation. You may think you're getting away with it, but the truth is you can't hide. That whatever you're doing is clearly visible to the one who matters most. I can't tell you the number of things I thought I was getting away with as a child. I can't tell you the number of things I thought I was getting away with as a rabbi. But the truth is, just because the sky didn't fall instantly doesn't mean God didn't see. And ultimately, He's the one that matters most. And we need to realize that, because we can pretend hypocritically, we can look good, we can act right in public or in congregation, we can sing the right words, say the right liturgy, read the right scriptures, do all of the things in the light, but God's also concerned with what we do in the dark, with what we do when we think no one is watching. And so as God is giving these commandments to His people about what their life is going to be like in the land, He starts out by saying, you guys have to understand, you may think you're getting away with not doing this stuff, but I see it. And you will reap what you sow. You're not hiding it. You might think you're getting away with it from somebody. You might think that coarse comment or that insult or that demeaning statement you made about somebody or that comment about last week's sermon just went away. But I'm telling you, you cannot hide from Him. This week in the news, if you watch the news, there's a case going on about a woman who killed her 3 kids. It's a horrible story. She had claims to have had postpartum psychosis. I don't know. I'm just being honest. I'm not in her mind. I don't know what was going on. What I do know is that a bunch of doctors gave her a bunch of medicine that if you took that medicine, it would mess you up just off of that much. I'm not anti-medicine necessarily, but if you just take that much medicine that are psychotropic, that are mind-altering drugs, it's going to alter your mind. But what I'm shocked by, and I shouldn't be, is the amazing hypocrisy of the commentators who are attacking this woman for killing her babies, while just last week they were rejoicing that they signed a law in Massachusetts that said you could kill a baby up until birth. I'm telling you, that hypocrisy, that hidden thing that we think we're getting away with, God sees. The hidden anti-Semitism. The snide remarks we make about other believers who just haven't understood what we understand. It isn't hidden from God. And we need to come to terms with that. And we need to ask God to forgive us for all the things we did in the darkness and bring them to the light. And allow Him to cleanse us of that. And listen, not only do we have to ask Him to forgive us for it and be sincere about doing so, but we have to stop doing it. We walk in the light, not in darkness. Turn to chapter 23. I'm going to skip the first 3 verses. I'll let somebody else preach this another time. But I want to talk about the 4th verse and the 5th verse, because this really relates to what I'm talking about in a real way. It says, an Ammonite or a Moabite shall not enter into the congregation of the Lord to their 10th generation. Shall they not enter into the Lord, into the congregation of the Lord, because they met you not with bread and with water in the way when you came out of Egypt, because they were hired against you. They hired against you Balaam, son of Beor, of Pethor, of Mesopotamia, to curse you. Okay. These couple of things. One, when it says enter the congregation of the Lord, it doesn't mean be with the people. It means enter into the temple, enter into the Mishkan, It doesn't mean they can't be around. It means they can't go into the temple. They're unclean, unsanctified to go into the temple. But here's the thing. It said this is to the 10th generation. That's a severe punishment. This punishment is more severe than the Egyptians. The Egyptians held the Israelites in slavery and bondage for 400 years. The Ammonites just didn't give them bread and water. Does that seem just a little disparate? I mean, when we look at this, it's like if I kept you in bondage for 50 years, I made you my servant and had you build pyramids for me, and I made life worse and worse and worse and worse, but you could just become part of the children of Israel. And Anthony, I said, hey, dude, could you buy me dinner? And he said, I ain't buying you dinner. And I said, you and your descendants for 10 generations can't come to Bridam. It doesn't sound right, does it? I mean, honestly, when I read this, that sounds like overkill. I mean, they just didn't give them food, and the truth was Israel had food. It wasn't like they were starving. It wasn't like they didn't have water. There was a rock going around with them pouring water out. It wasn't that they needed what they had. So why is this such a significant thing? Now we look at them asking Balaam, hiring Balaam to curse them, but Balaam doesn't curse them. Balaam tells them how they can curse themselves, and they do, but God should punish Israel for that more than Balaam. Because if I give you a gift certificate for penthouse, and you buy the penthouse, you should get punished for buying the penthouse. Is penthouse still around? Am I talking? Who do I look at when I ask that question? Let me use a different example. If I buy you a gift certificate for Diet Coke, and you buy the Diet Coke, that's on you. If I invite you to sin, it's up to you whether you do or not. So why is this such a significant punishment for the Ammonites and the Moabites? Am I the only one that sees this as if God is all they did? You're using a shotgun instead of a hammer. You're using, a nuclear missile instead of a bullet. Why is this so significant? And I think I know why. Because the Ammonites and the Moabites were family. These are the descendants of Lot, Abraham's nephew. These are kinfolks. See, the Egyptians weren't family. The Egyptians weren't part of this community. The Egyptians, you wouldn't expect the Egyptians to be anything but Egyptians. But these were Lot's descendants. They knew the God of Abraham. And they knew that the children of Israel were their cousins. They were family. And even knowing that, they refused to give bread and water to their family. They refused to give something simple. Bread and water are the least things. It didn't say they didn't give them filet mignon. It said they didn't give them bread and water. They didn't give them what you give prisoners. And this was their family. And then they sent someone to speak curses over them. Their family. Listen, I think this connects perfectly with the previous verses and what we were talking about. Because there's nothing that hurts worse than the betrayal by a loved one. When somebody outside of my family or outside of my community, if somebody outside of Bridom says something about me that is evil, I don't really care. When somebody says something on one of my social media posts that attacks me and I don't know who they are, it doesn't bother me at all. I usually don't even respond because their opinion means zero to me. They don't have any influence on my life. I've not invested in them. They've not invested in me. I don't know them. They don't know me. They're guessing and acting horribly for no reason. But if Timothy says something, or Jan, or Abraham, or Robert, or Lincoln, or Kristen, or anybody who's part of our family. If I do something and somebody misinterprets it and then acts as if I did something evil and then attacks me for that, that knife hurts. Even if I do something wrong and someone attacks me instead of coming to me to help me, that knife hurts. Because it's family. When I was in business and somebody outside of my community didn't pay me or didn't do something, I expect sinners to be sinners. I don't like it, but it didn't hurt. But if I did work for somebody within the community, somebody who was supposed to be a follower of God, somebody who was supposed to be a child of Abraham through faith, somebody who's part of our family, that hurts twice as much, or maybe 10 times as much. I think this is not just beating up on the Ammonites and the Moabites, but I think it's making it clear that we as a family, we as a community, we as people who are supposed to love one another and give ourselves for each other, lay our lives down for those we claim to love, humble ourselves, Look for the best instead of the worst. Strive to be at peace with, if at all possible. When we don't, when somebody needs help and they ask for something, and we have the ability to meet that need, and we don't because they made their own bed, let them sleep in it, we become Ammonites. And we're not worthy to enter in to the congregation of the Lord. When somebody is blessed, now understand the context of Moab. Israel was just trying to go through to get to their own land. They weren't wanting to stay on the Moabites' land. They weren't wanting to take anything. They were just want to walk through in peace to get to where they were going. But Moab knew the blessings of God, how God was taking care of the Israelites, how God had delivered them from Egypt, how they were winning victory after victory, and how they were prospering in the desert. In other words, they got angry because God was blessing them. God was blessing their family, and they wanted to curse them because of that blessing. Listen, we need to be so careful that we don't curse those God is blessing within our community just because we don't think they deserve it. Now listen, this is important. Israel was in slavery for 400 years because they didn't listen to God. When the famine was over, they should have all went home. They chose to stay in Egypt. They dug that hole. And eventually, the hole got too big for them to climb out of by themselves. There are people in our community that dug their own hole. But God is blessing them to get them out of it, to restore them, to help them. And we can't get our minds past their hole. To see God's desire to bless those people and restore them and help them out of the hole. Help them to be what God wants them to be. And so we see that happening, and we don't like God's blessing them because we don't think they deserve it, they earn it, they should have it. After all, weren't they that or this or the other thing? Didn't you know what they did? Don't you know what they said? Listen, there are people that worship here that came here and left and came here and left and came here and left and came here and left, and they're here now. And I rejoice that they're here and God's blessing them. Why did they leave? I don't care. I don't care if they left because they were mad at me. I don't care if they left because they were in sin. If they repented and were restored and they're filled with God's Spirit and they have a desire to live for God, I rejoice that God took them out of the hole and He's blessing them. I'm not going to curse that which God is blessing. Because by doing so, I make it so I'm unworthy to enter the congregation of the Lord. And listen, this is only 2 of the instructions that are given in this Parsha. And only part of those 2 I think every word of it God gave so that we could apply it to our lives and understand that we're all in Egypt. Every one of us. We were born in sin, shapen in iniquity. Every one of us was in Egypt in bondage to sin. And we're all on our journey to the promised land. And God's given us instructions on how to live as a family, as a community. How do we interact with one another? How do we lift one another up? How do we encourage one another? How do we bring conviction into somebody's life instead of condemnation? How do we look at somebody in sin and help them out instead of just jumping on them there? How do we climb the ladder of success without pushing the people in front of us and behind us down on our way? How do we allow God to bless us and not curse those around us? I remember when I was a young believer, and this will be my first close, we were struggling. Pammy and I, we were poor. And we had a car that just barely ran sometimes. And there was a couple in our congregation that I thought were just awful people. I mean, they were just awful. They were judgmental. They were mean. They constantly berated people, spoke down. I get to service one week, and they pull up in a brand new car that somebody else in the congregation had bought for them. They didn't do anything at the congregation. They didn't empty the trash. They didn't plunge the toilets. They didn't help with the grass. They didn't pick up after service. They showed up late and left early. And I was so angry with God and with those people. Because Pammy and I, we were there at every service, and we were there early. And we helped, and we cleaned up, and we did all of the things. And nobody bought us a new car. Man, I was angry. And I prayed. It took me a while. But God spoke to my heart. And he said something I'll never forget. Two things. One, I don't know what I think I know. And two, it ain't my money. One, I don't know what God's doing in the heart of that other person. I don't know what God has for them, in them, and through them. I don't know what they've been through to get them where they are. So I can't decide if they're worthy of God's blessing or not. And number two, it's not my money. It's not up to me to decide what God does with what He has. Over the years, since then, God has blessed us with people who gave us money to buy cars. When that happened, I stopped and prayed for anybody who might have acted like I did when God did that for somebody else. That they wouldn't have to learn the lesson the hard way. I don't want to be an Ammonite. I don't want to be a Moabite. I don't want you to be an Ammonite. I don't want you to be a Moabite. Not in public like we read in this chapter, or in the dark as we saw it in the previous chapter. God wants to bless his people. And every time he does, we should rejoice. We should be happy for them. Anything else is cursing them. To the 10th generation. Let's all stand.